I think that the discussion of political culture was an even better introduction to talking about the new Badger Partnership than I could have known. I want to start simply by saying it's been an incredible year at UW-Madison, as many of you know. It's been an incredible 18 months. The proof that I've been talking about the new Badger Partnership for 18 months is that many of you will already feel you've heard too much about it. You've heard me say many of the same things about it in different venues for a very long time now. What I've done is try to take some of the questions that you all sent in by email or that we know you've asked in other ways and incorporate them into the few remarks that I'll make. We don't have microphones on the floor, and I was told we couldn't therefore plan for questions from the audience, but if I finish up quickly enough and there's some really urgent question that somebody wants to shout out about the new Badger Partnership, I'll be glad to try to answer it. So when we started this between a year and 18 months ago, and when I say we, I mean an entire team of people, and we started it because we knew from every report that we'd read over the past 10 years or that had been generated on the campus or off the campus, we knew from talking to faculty, to staff, to students, and to you all, to alumni, and we knew possibly most definitively from the deans and directors that the governance of the university is one of our most serious problems. In the past two accreditation reports, the campus generated self-studies about its own governance problems and then got commentary from those outside evaluators who came to reaccredit the university, saying, in one case quite explicitly, that if the governance problems are not solved for UW-Madison, the quality of this great university will deteriorate. We began thinking about what we can do in an environment that has changed dramatically, even over the past 5 to 10 years, to ensure that we keep the balance at UW-Madison between our public mission, which includes indicatively access and affordability on the one hand, and the quality of this great research engine on the other. How to balance quality with access and affordability. That's been the challenge that I was given when I was hired for this job. That's the challenge I take seriously and take to be my task as well as the task of my team and all of you. The first initiative we undertook when I got here was the Madison Initiative for Undergraduates. And as many of you know, that was a decision to increase tuition slightly at UW-Madison for really several purposes, but three key purposes. First, to create need-based financial aid, which this university had virtually none of when I came, institutional grant money that we could award on the basis of need. Secondly, to improve undergraduate education, to make sure that our undergraduate curriculum actually reflects the advances in research and discovery of which we're so proud. And third, to improve undergraduate education by replacing faculty positions which have been lost over the past decade or 15 years, lost to such a significant degree that students were not getting the majors they needed, they were not getting into the courses they needed, and not graduating on time as a result. The Madison Initiative for Undergraduates has increased faculty positions on this campus by 80, and institutional grant aid for our students with need has increased over the past 2.5 years by 226%. Our commitment to access and affordability has never been stronger, and our commitment to the best faculty in the world has also never been stronger. The new Badger Partnership evolved over the course of the gubernatorial election. We talked with every gubernatorial candidate at least twice about what we needed in the way of changes in our business model, changes in the governance of the university. We talked to each of three candidates. This is when Mark Newman was still a candidate in the Wisconsin gubernatorial race. We talked to each one of them about the excessive layers of bureaucracy that constrain what we do, that cost us in time and in money. We talked about regulatory constraints at the level of the state and the system that prevent us from doing things that other universities all over the country do, For example, use a portion of tuition income to cover some financial aid. Every university in the country virtually does that. It's called a discount rate on tuition. We're not allowed to use tuition to cover financial aid for our students with need. When it comes to personnel policies, we don't have the titles and classifications and pay grades that we need if you want us to be a competitive research university. Why? Because the titles and job classifications and pay rates are set to be suitable for a different kind of state agency entirely. And one of my mantras throughout this campaign has been, we cannot remain a world-class research university if we are treated as if we're just any other state agency. It just won't work. When it comes to pay, I've made this point many times, we need, for the good of the state of Wisconsin, for the good of this country, and for the good of the world, to remain a world-class research university. How do we do that when we're not allowed even to use our own money to pay our faculty unless every other state employee is getting a pay increase? We can't. There have been no pay plans for state employees for several biennia in this state. And even if you all came en masse to me, as I've said to you many times today, and said, Biddy, here's $100 million or $200 million, use the payout from that endowment to raise the salaries of your faculty so that they are competitive. I would not be allowed to use your money to do that because other state employees are not getting pay increases. This is a situation that simply cannot continue without demoralizing the campus and leaving us unable to be what this state and this nation needs us to be. So we developed a plan that would give us greater autonomy from the state, that would give us more flexibility in the use of our resources. It would actually give us our resources. That is, under a public authority model, which the governor proposed, we would own for the first time our own revenue. What do I mean by that? Right now, tuition, program revenue that's raised by housing or by athletics or any other unit, all of those revenue sources, which are non-state tax dollar revenue sources, are still considered to be part of the state's general fund. So when the state has a budget crisis or a deficit, what do they do historically to fill the budget hole? They sweep from the campus program revenue in the form of student fees, tuition, and other program revenue because it's considered general fund revenue. Under a public authority model, those sources of revenue would be off state books and they would be our revenue. We would be able to manage our own funding and use it more flexibly in order to support this university. We would also be able, if we had our funding, to pay our faculty more and our staff, even in the absence of a state pay plan. We would be able to avoid the costly processes through which we now go, as many as 20 to 30 steps when we purchase an item. Once we go through UW-Madison, the system, and the Department of Administration in the state. In facilities, management, and construction, we would be able to avoid, when we use non-state tax dollar revenue, paying the 4% fee that DOA requires, and we'd be able to manage our own construction projects so that the time and the cost of those projects would go down. I think one of the most important aspects of the potential of public authority for the university is that the ability to own and use our revenue in the ways that we need most to do would allow us over time to rely less on tuition, less exclusively on tuition increases than we're going to have to if this doesn't occur. That leads me to the questions and concerns that people have had about the governor's proposal that we achieve these flexibilities in the new Badger Partnership and these forms of autonomy as a public authority, like the Wisconsin hospitals, UW hospitals and clinics. So for a lot of people, the single biggest problem with the public authority model is that it differentiates us from UW's system. And why is that a problem? That's considered to be a problem for several reasons, which are completely valid concerns, which I believe we've addressed. One is that if we were to have taken the name UW, the University of Wisconsin, it would have robbed the other campuses of the prestige they gained by being part of a system with Madison. We made sure that when the legislation and the language of the legislation came to us, and initially it did indeed go to pre-1971 naming and called us the University of Wisconsin, we immediately said no. Every campus in Wisconsin in this system must share with us the brand, the name, University of Wisconsin. And we need to be tied in that way forever. The second concern was that we would suddenly, for some reason, drop the transfer agreements and the research and educational collaborations, as well as administrative collaborations with the other campuses. We made up memoranda of understandings, the virtual equivalent at a university of a contractual agreement, signed them and sent them to every chancellor in the system, assuring all of them, not only will we sustain our existing collaborations, but we will enhance them, because they're not actually nearly as strong as they could be. The third concern was that if Madison has some separation from the system, there would be too much competition for resources. And we have responded to that fear or concern by saying that there are ways of creating boards that are coordinated in their efforts. Some competition is actually good in the world to prevent the worst ravages of negative forms of competition for resources in the state. It would be possible to create coordination between boards. The tuition fear, I think, was for a very long time the biggest one, and I heard just yesterday morning on the radio that one of our system leaders has once again said that what we really seek is to be Michigan. We'd like to have tuition rates that are equivalent to private universities. That has never been the case. We have always said that this has to be a Wisconsin-based model. It has to take into account what the median family income in Wisconsin is. It has to take affordability into account and make it a high priority. We can do that by creating more financial aid, committing not to raise tuition any more than we would raise it if we were in the system for the next 2 years, which we have done, and relying over time more on new forms of autonomy and management of our resources so that we don't have only tuition as a source of flexible revenue to use going forward. I'm glad that the student video on international study preceded what I have to say for the following reason. Here's the world that we're in. We're in a world where the competition for the best scientists and scholars and even students has never been fiercer. Why? For two key reasons. One, the hiring bulge of the 60s, when major universities in the United States grew to accommodate more young people. That hiring bulge has now become a retirement bulge. There are a huge number of retirements in American universities that have already started, but over the next 7 to 9 years will be extraordinary. Every major university in the United States is therefore trying to outwit and outpay the other in the race to hire the best young scholars and scientists. Now add to that the fact that every region in the world, whether it's Asia, South America, Europe, which is transforming its higher ed system as we speak, every part of the world, every region is trying to establish major research universities. Why? Because we're in a global knowledge economy where innovation, technology development and transfer, and education of young people in the ways that will ensure innovation and the transfer of knowledge are vital. So if you go to China, if you go to Beijing, if you go to Shanghai, if you go to Taiwan, if you go to Hong Kong, if you go anywhere in Brazil, you know that it's not just American universities that are competing for talent, it's now the entire world. Because of development around the world, but also because of the kind of economy in which we find ourselves. And here's my primary message to the state of Wisconsin. UW-Madison is a treasure. The state of Wisconsin cannot afford to lose what every other region in the world is rushing to build. If the state of Wisconsin loses a world-class research university, the one it has in its midst, the one it has with incredible discipline and sacrifice built over 160 years, the impact on Wisconsin's economy, its social world, and its cultural standing will be severe. That's what has motivated us to develop the new Badger Partnership. Some of you asked in your email questions, what does this have to do with the Wisconsin idea? It has everything to do with the Wisconsin idea. The 21st century incarnation of the Wisconsin idea is what a world-class research university can do to bolster existing industries, to create jobs by creating entirely new sectors in the world of business and industry, what it can do to create jobs directly. The most recent economic impact study shows UW-Madison has a $12.6 billion impact in Wisconsin and creates, directly and indirectly, 128,000 jobs. What does an effective and efficient mode of operating and the ability to compete with world-class universities in the rest of the world have to do with the Wisconsin idea? It has everything to do with the Wisconsin idea. We want young people in the state of Wisconsin now and across future generations to have the best possible education in a setting where research, independent thinking, independent work of their own as undergraduates is available. We want the best minds, and we want to contribute to the state's traditional industries, whether it's agriculture or manufacturing. We want to build new industries in the state. We want to be the engine that ensures the state of Wisconsin does well now and into the future. That's the Wisconsin idea. To say that because we would be differentiated and to some degree separate from other system campuses, to say that that is a failure to follow the Wisconsin idea is to be so insular in one's thinking about this project. I would say to you, Wisconsin has got to be in the world. Just as those students said to you, they recognize when they go abroad that it's not going to be enough simply to be educated well in state. It's a global economy. We're interconnected culturally, socially, in every other way. We have got to be in the world if Wisconsin is going to thrive. UW-Madison is a talent magnet. It brings in extraordinary amounts of revenue from outside the state of Wisconsin, over $1 billion a year in research money, in philanthropy, and in out-of-state tuition. On what basis do we get that external money, that research money, that philanthropy, those out-of-state students? Quality and talent and reputation. The deterioration of quality means an end to that extraordinarily thriving export business that UW-Madison is for the state of Wisconsin. Our students need to be placed into networks, social and professional, with people from all over the world. Wisconsin has to be in the world in order to flourish as a state. This is not just about the UW system. It is not about Wisconsin higher ed only. It's about what UW-Madison can do for the state, the nation, and the world. And all we're saying is, turn us loose so that we can do more with our own sources of strength and revenue. We're not doing it at anyone else's expense. We're not doing it as a way of escaping our commitments to others. On the contrary, it's a way to ensure that our commitments to others can be met. I understand it has generated fear and anxiety and even anger, partly because of the support this idea got from Governor Walker. And one of the questions you asked me to answer, one of you or a couple of you, is it true, do I think it's true that Governor Walker simply wanted us to accept huge budget cuts more easily by holding out the promise of something that won't end up being good for the state? My answer is, no, I don't. Governor Walker was no more interested in this idea when we talked to the gubernatorial candidates than Tom Barrett was, or Mark Newman. They were all interested in it for the reasons that I just explained. They understand what a driver UW-Madison is, not just for this state, but what any major research university is as a driver for any state or region that it's in. There's been a lot of opposition that has been explained to me on the basis of Governor Walker's support. I understand the world is polarized. We just had 3 faculty members talking about it. And I've had a lot of people say to me, what are you doing working with him? Or, you know, in the terms people prefer, why are you in bed with Scott Walker? All I can say is this. 3 things, then I'll stop. He's the governor of the state, and I am the chancellor of the flagship campus in Wisconsin. The notion that I would not work with the governor for political reasons strikes me as, well, really odd. Secondly, the university is officially, as a public university, a nonpartisan institution. Where does the assumption come from that Governor Walker's support is something that the university or some parts of it ought not to support? I don't understand that either. And third, this is not about Governor Walker or partisan politics. This is about the future of the state of Wisconsin. The end. Thank you very much.